Okay, here we go. Vern Gambetta, welcome to the podcast. How you doing?
Very well, Brent. Thanks for having me on. I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, yeah. Listen, it's been a long time coming. You're one of those names where I often get people reach out to me and say, "You've got to have this guest, you've got to have that guest," and I've known your name for many years, and I've been wanting to get around to get you, and it's just been one
Yeah,
of those things
yeah.
where it never worked out. But I'm glad we're here now. So but
Good.
again, but you're also one of those names where people talk about you a lot because you've done a lot of great things over the past 30, 40 years in the space of
Mhm.
strength and conditioning. And you've really made a
Yeah.
name for yourself, haven't you?
Well, I appreciate that. And again, I don't want to be. Uh, I just been very worked hard. I mean,
Hmm.
you have to work at it, and you at your craft, you work at your game, and constantly learning. And
Yeah.
I been very fortunate to have some great mentors and to be in various places where I've been able to. Be associated with great teams, great athletes, and learn, both ways. And so, yeah, it's been really good. And it's the swimming piece has been, everybody goes, well, all of a sudden, because of, lately. And I go, I mean, I started doing stuff at swimming in 1971 in
Wow.
Santa Barbara with Jack Simon, and
Wow.
uh, and then and then at Cal when I was the women's track coach at Cal, and Nort was, the excuse me, the swim coach there, and we
Mm,
get together often as possible and pick his brain. So, because of athletics, track and field, swimming was so parallel in terms of learning about training and exchanging ideas back and forth. So, yeah, I've been it's been fun. It's been a fun journey, and I'm at as they say, I'm probably on the 16th hole. I hope. I wish I was on the 14th hole, but it's the opportunity now to work with the people that I'm working with, the teams that, well, with Summer and actually one other athlete, Steve Perry, a world-class cricketer, and it's cool. It's a fun way to put an exclamation point on it, I guess. So,
Well, I love
yeah.
what you've done in terms of writing books and doing conferences and sharing your knowledge, sharing your ideas. When someone who's been in it as long as you and you've done and you go to these conferences and you write these books, how have things evolved since the time that you started
Yeah.
doing this to where you are today?
That's a really, really good question, and the basics have never changed, Brett. I mean, that's one of the things that I emphasize a lot, and I'm reflecting. I'm getting to speak at the Ask a World Clinic this year
Hmm.
again, and my first time was 1990, and I got up there, and the audience had no clue what I'd done, where I was from. Why is this guy from the Chicago White Sox talking to us? And
Right.
and I was, it's funny. I found my notes, and it was just reviewing the basics. Like, you guys, if
Mm,
we're going to do strength training, we're going to do dry land training. Yeah, it's swimming, but you swim in the pool to get out, or you do dry land out of the
right.
water, you do strength training out of the water to enable you to get better in the water. And so the basics have never changed. I think what we've done is we've dressed things up in fancy clothes,
Mm,
uh, which sometimes got us a little bit away from the basics. Um, and um, and we certainly know a lot more. I mean, I think back to when I started coaching in 1969, the technical knowledge in the area of, if you want to call it strength and conditioning or athletic development, wasn't primitive. It was sound, but now we
hmm.
know what the adaptive responses are. We understand. I think we're starting to understand, better differences men and women, and so what
Right.
training stimulus does, and yeah, just a lot of things. And I think we understand the body in depth so much better. 50 years ago, everything that if you look at the books behind me, all the
Mm,
books were in regard to cardiovascular function, heart rate, max VO2, all of that. And now really in the last 25 years, that's kind of at the turn of the we recognize that the role that the nervous system plays. We recognize the role of the endocrine hormonal system, and what the stimulus that, and I'm going to talk swimming now because that's the audience that you
hmm.
have, and that's where I'm, pun intended, totally immersed right now.
Yeah.
That what the stimulus that dryland strength training and dryland training can have in terms of endocrine hormonal environment to change what they do in the water too. So it's fascinating to see how quickly things have changed. And the other thing that's changed, Brett, as you know, just we're on a podcast that the dissemination of information and misinformation is so you have to have I feel sorry for some of the young coaches out there that don't have the filter that us old guys have been able to develop, like really BS. Don't go down that route. And I've seen some swimming stuff that I just cringe, And the other statement that I like to make, and this is where I think swimming dry land and out of the water, we'll call it anything out of the water, was strength training in the 70s was, let's just beat the crap out of them. So we get another, and they say, oh, we're doing an hour. I don't know. I mean, I know what our time frame is. We never do an hour of dry land. It's in short, sharp bursts. And so anybody can get tired, but can you get them better? That's really the cornerstone too. So and evolved over the years. So
that's interesting. When you say the basics, right? Like when I think of the basics, there's no way around hard work. You've still got to put in hard work. Like I think people look at at modern training and think to themselves, well, how can I make this easier than it was? It's not so much about making something easier. We're certainly working to be smarter and a little bit more specific than maybe we were in the past, so that, like you said, we can cut down on time. When I became a professional athlete, I wanted to swim the 50 freestyle as fast as I possibly could. So I wanted to get from one end of the pool to the other. That's all I wanted to do, Vern. And I was being trained in an environment where I was being put into pockets of practices with people that were doing something completely different than me. They were swimming 400s and 800s and 1500s and 200 butterflies, and we're all kind of grouped up together. And so when I moved into the world of professional athletics, I realized I needed to be doing things that were helping me get from one end of the pool to the other. And that's really all I needed to do. And so that's not about removing the idea of hard work. Right. Like it's still very, very difficult, but it's specific to what you're trying to get in the outcome. Right.
Yeah, exactly. And then that's one of the biggest challenges you have, whether it's swimming or whether it's athletics. You've got a spectrum of it, from the 50 to the, I always talk log course, from the 50 to the 1500 and now open water. And, there's certain basic, like I say on dry land, there's certain basic exercises everybody must do to thrive in the aquatic environment. And then you make it appropriate to the stroke, and then you make it appropriate to the individual, and appropriate to the race, to the distance. And it's tough like I'm day to day with the Sharks, and it's tough in an age group environment sometimes because very seldom in an age group team do you have true sprinters, but we've got a couple of kids that go that way, and they will be sprinters in college. And so sometimes it's just taking them aside and saying, well, it is, you're going to do a similar movement, similar workout, but the rest is going to be greater. So now if we had a true sprinter, and that was when I helped with Tennessee and when I worked at Singapore, we had true sprinters. So, we had sprints, and we had middle distance, and we had distance, and, open water, and the emphasis was different. But you find yourself in an environment like a lot of times yourself, where you're in with people that are getting ready to swim a 200, and it's not compatible with a lot of times with a fast 50. So for sure.
Yeah. Vern, this term came into strength and conditioning. I'm not exactly sure the exact date, but within the last 20 years, let's say, and the term is functional strength training. There was something that came about a lot. What is functional strength training?
Well, some people call me the godfather, the father of functional training, and it's not very functional training is a bastard stepchild. I'm sorry, or an illegitimate son or daughter, illegitimate child. I mean, so hell is if I'm walking, it's functional, right? If I,
Right.
and so to label something functional or non-functional is a little crazy. So okay, but I'll accept that, my book is, I guess, has functional training in the title,
Right.
and it's not either or, it's not black and white, it's a continuum. Okay. And some things are more appropriate for the activity you're trained for, and some things aren't.
Right.
And so that's the way I look at it. So I look at function as a continuum. Over here, just very low level transfer. Over here, high level transfer. The highest transfer to being a fast swimmer is get in the water and swim. And that. So I'm okay. I guess I'm okay with it, but I'm not okay with some of the weird stuff that I see called functional training. Okay. And I'm not interested in, and there's and immediately the first thing that comes from this is specificity. See?
Right.
Well, the highest degree of specificity is to swim in the water.
Right.
And I'm working with swimmers right now. And this is, I really want to point this out. Everything we do out of the water is designed for them to be able to be more efficient in the water. I use the same language that Brent uses, and in terms of we're always working to create a better line, a better streamline.
Right.
It's not how much you can lift. It's can you link, sync, and connect. Okay. And
Link, sync, and connect. I like that.
that's the
Link, sync,
mantra.
and connect.
I think the kids get tired of listening to it. Link, sync, and connect. Is your shoulder connecting to your hip? Is your hip connecting to your knee and ankle? So everything, we're not doing isolation. And that's what, if you say sort of dysfunctional training, would be traditional kind of bodybuilding, or even some of the heavy lifting stuff that's done. I mean, I don't understand the infatuation with power clean for swimmers, even for a 50-meter sprinter. There's great ways to develop power without, and we do a lot of Olympic lifting movements and that in diagonal rotational patterns with dumbbells and things like that. But the objective is to get everything connected and linked up, and better. So I got deviated a little bit from the question, but
no,
so
I like that. I like that.
And so I look at specific is working on butterfly and whatever, even drills sometimes are not specific. And then I like to use the word appropriate. So what I do before they get in the water, is it appropriate to set you up so that you can do better in the water? Some of our kids the fly is a great example. I'll use Emma Wyant as an example. Emma was so weak coming up through the system. And then the pandemic was a godsend for her, because it was for about 6 weeks, it was her, Brent, and I, and we got her to really bear down on the strength training piece. And I think, I'm not trying to take credit for this, because Brent was right there with me, the fly is a more strength oriented stroke. And that was the key for her to swim that first 100 fly fast, easy. But she was too weak to do that, so fine, that addresses that need. That's a represent. I'm not saying that to drop names or anything like that, but that's a classic example, and people that have followed the sport could see the difference in her, in that. So,
yeah, I love it. There's so much to talk about here, and I'm gonna dig into something specific from my point of view, right? So, like, I coached a couple of guys that swam 20 seconds in the 50 freestyle long course. Two guys, Fred Busquet was the first, and then Cesar Cielo was the second.
yeah.
But they both had the technology on, right, Vern? They both
Yeah.
had the suits on at the time.
Yeah.
And now we're at a point where people are breaking these world records, but they haven't broken 21 seconds yet. They haven't got under this elusive mark that the two guys that I was coaching had in these suits. How do we get faster? How do we get more power? How do we get sustained speed that we can hold for 50 meters? Because the way I see it, Vern, is that the person that swims the fastest in the 50 is the person that slows down the least,
Absolutely.
right?
Exactly.
Is that correct?
That's absolutely correct. We know that from athletics and the, the 100 and 200, well, in 200, 200, 400,
You
and
watch
it's
Usain
same.
Bolt, right? Usain Bolt
Yeah,
kind of holds his speed where the
yeah,
other guys
right, right,
seemingly
right.
fall off at
Yeah,
the 50-meter
exactly.
mark.
Yeah. So go ahead.
Yeah, so that's where I'm at. I'm trying to figure out, well, how do we get more power in our stroke? How do we get more sustained speed? These are
yeah.
questions that I'm asking myself, and now I'm going to turn to an expert in the field, and I'm trying to figure this out, Vern. Like, how do we get guys to go under 21 seconds in the 50 free without
Well,
these suits?
yeah. I mean, if I had the answer, I'd be sitting on the top of the mountain with a long beard and collecting a lot of money. So,
Exactly.
but I want to make sure that people understand that these are some educated opinions and
Right.
observation,
Right.
and looking from, because I always look, and I told you as an athletics coach, I always look to swimming,
Hmm.
and as a and I
I
know,
always looked at track.
yeah, exactly,
Yeah.
and and Brent gets tired of me, and so does Webb get tired, and Plum and those guys get tired of me coming, sending them thoughts from track and things like
Mm-hmm.
that.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, there's two cliches. The answer is there is no answer, but the search for it
Yeah.
is really cool. And
Yeah.
but there are a lot of things that have been done were correct, but they weren't done systematically, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
So resistance work in the pool, I don't think so. That's one thing, but we've always overloaded too much on resistance.
Mm-hmm.
So, and I learned this with my event was decathlon, and but again, we still have to sprint, right?
All
And
right.
my athletes, and instead of loading the resistance up, whatever means you use, is find that sweet spot where it just allows you to hold the line better a little bit longer and
Yes.
be able to
Yes.
feel the catch
Yes.
where you would go through the catch. And that's a lot of one-on-one. It's a lot easier to throw more weight on the tower or something like that and
Mm-hmm.
displace a lot of water.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
I always
you
felt
know,
like the timing of that, Vern, was crucial to power and speed development, because what I found is that you like anything, you could take a nail and a hammer and you could beat the hell out of the
yeah,
nail, right, until it
yeah,
was just blunt.
yeah,
And what I found is like that sweet spot you're talking about, when you take that hammer and you flush that nail and it sinks, and
yeah.
it's one hit, kind of boom.
One hit and
That,
go. Yeah.
yeah, that to me was when we were hitting the sweet spot in the power
Mhm.
development, is that we were doing the right amount at the right time, and then walking away and not beating the
Mhm.
crap out of it, you know?
Well, having the guts to walk away when you're talking to 50 and the 100, that's the biggest thing. I want them to leave them singing. I want them
Yes.
leaving with another rep.
Yes.
I've seen some pretty screwed up, I mean, and play a little bit. Everybody should play a little bit. I think
Yes.
every swimming session, whether you swim 1,500 or 50, there should be a lane devoted to being a kid. It's the kid lane, and you just do goofy stuff for 5 minutes
Absolutely.
where you're holding
Absolutely.
your breath, blowing bubbles. I don't give a rip, just get in touch with the water. But back to that, I think the area, and there's technology now available, and I
Mhm.
don't want to sound like I'm endorsing something, but
Yeah.
1080 is very expensive, $20,000. So it's not
1080,
real.
is that what you said?
Yeah, 1080 motion. And for assisted, we don't do enough, and we use elastic, which gives you a quick, uh, you know, burst of, but we're like with the 1080, you can, and so if I'm
What's
going
with
to
the
do,
assisted, Vern? We know what resisted does. What does assisted do?
well, you swim fast. What I like to do is, okay, say your best time is 20 flat.
Right.
Okay, we're going to do 550s today
Mhm.
at 20 flat.
Mm.
You go 90% effort and you're swimming 20 flat,
Yeah.
and you feel what 20 flat feels like.
Yeah.
And you feel like the adjustments you have to make in body line in
Yes.
catching that.
Yes.
The mistake that people make with assistance is your best time is 20 flat. We're going to pull you at 16 or 18,
Right.
and
Yeah,
you're
yeah.
thrashing again. See,
Mm, mm.
and look, I don't want to sound, look, you're great sprinter yourself and you've coached great sprinters. But I think sometimes, and go back to Bud Winter, one of the greatest sprint coaches of all time at San Jose State. It's about relax. He wrote a great book called Relax to Win. And so if I can do those extremely fast movements without tension, okay, then that's the secret to being faster,
Right. Yeah. Yep.
and then out of the water, I heavy is not fast, and I think the mistake that
Oh yeah.
sprinters
I've
make,
seen heavy look ugly, and it's not good.
yeah, and it doesn't transfer, and we
No.
learned the
No.
hard way
Yeah.
in track from about 95 to 2010, the sprinters looked like, and they were running faster, but now if you look at the sprinters again, they have that more long lean look. And I think I know from some of my colleagues that are coaching these people that the emphasis in the weight room is less about heavy and about moving the weight, connecting again. Okay.
That's where
And
swimming's going too, Vern. You look at David Popovich, you look at Clay
oh yeah,
Winkler.
yeah,
You look at these
yeah,
guys,
yeah,
these young guys. They're tall and thin and lean, and they're looking for length and reach, and they're swimming
yeah.
really fast.
Well, it's interesting, and I'm not trying to take credit for Popovich, but his dryland coach and strength coach came to Gain, and came to and we started connecting, gosh, in Rome in 2016,
Yeah.
and he comes from another sport too. He comes
Ah,
from team handball,
wow.
and so he's taken the power aspect
Mm-hmm.
from that,
Mm-hmm.
and yet the other things that we do, and because yeah, he's a terrific example, and I mean, he and technically he's extremely sound, right? I
Yeah.
mean,
Yeah.
that's not, if you can be extremely sound, he's as sound as you can get, but
Right.
yeah, and so but it's hard to accept, Brett, because chasing numbers in the weight room, particularly with men, I ran into this both in Singapore and at Tennessee. Well, I don't feel strong because I can't bench this,
Right.
and but the watch doesn't lie, man. You
Mm-hmm.
just swam your lifetime best. Well, I didn't feel strong. What do you want to put? Do you put your bench press number up next to
Mm-hmm.
your swim time?
Yeah.
And that's a it's almost like a psychosocial thing, especially. I don't
Yeah.
think I haven't seen that much with women, but that's sort of a male thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't
Yeah.
know if that. I mean, if that it's doing what's been done with a better systematic approach,
Right.
and recognizing that. I always say, leave something in the tank. Leave something in the tank. I can
Yes.
always do one more rep or something like that.
I'll give you something
And
on that,
that's
Vern.
freaking
Yeah.
hard to do.
It is. It is. And I'll give you something on that. One of the things people are always trying to ask me, what made me a great sprint coach at the time when I had all these great sprinters. And one of the things that I did in our training that I felt was very, very crucial was I always wanted my sprinters to walk off the deck with a smile on their face.
Yeah, yeah.
And that seems stupid, right? But
No.
I was going through a period of time where I wanted to beat the hell out of them, and I wanted to get everything I could out of them, and they were walking off the deck unhappy,
Oh,
and
yeah.
they were coming back unhappy because they would walk off unhappy,
Yeah, yeah.
and then next time I see them, they're unhappy because they had the same feeling of when they walked off the deck. So I felt,
Sure.
well, if I can have them smiling and laughing and joking and wanting to come back,
Yeah,
then the next workout's going to be great.
yeah.
And so you always leave a little bit in the tank so that you give yourself enough to want to come
Absolutely.
back and do it again.
Absolutely. And I have an axiom that I learned from a great sprint coach. Gary Winkler is retired now, coached a lot of really great hurdlers and sprinters, primarily female, and won an NC2A championship at Florida State purely with sprinters, which is unheard of in track. No distance runners or nobody in the field. And his axiom was you want the last rep of what you do, whether it's out of the water or in the water, to leaving with the feeling that you want them to start the next day.
Yes,
And that's
yes.
brilliant. I mean,
That is
now
so
let me
good.
tell you, that's easy to say and hard to do. And I'm not
Yeah.
going to talk about Summer very much, but Summer likes to work, and she's
Yep.
she's an absolute great kid,
Yep.
very mature. And sometimes I'll say, Summer, stop.
Hmm.
We're doing some core
Right.
work. And
Right.
she looks at me and I go, yeah. And she goes, I get it,
Yeah.
and,
Yeah.
and that's where, and again, that's where the coach comes in. It's called iology. You know, I don't think there's something we can monitor that. Your athlete, and
Mhm.
when it's time to say stop.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it's tough though sometimes, Brent,
Yeah.
when you have a workhorse.
Oh, for sure. For sure.
And
Yeah.
generally your sprint type is going to be more a thoroughbred, not a workhorse or a plow horse. But that's
Yeah,
a
well, the problem was when we had them all together, then it was they wanted to outdo each other. Then it was like, well, if he's faster than me, then I have to outwork him, or so then it became this, this masculinity contest of like
yeah, yeah,
who can get one up on the other person, and then now you're beating the hell out of each other just within the group internally. So
sure,
then I
sure.
I had to create separations. I had to write separate workouts over
Mhm.
here and put people over there, and then piece them together at the right moments, right? Like bring them
Yeah,
in and say, okay, now we can compete. But yeah, that is the difficulty of having a great group of sprinters
yeah.
together.
Oh yeah,
But certainly not the mentality of a Summer McIntosh where she's in there just grinding every day. Our work ethic consisted of the recovery, right? Like recovery was so vital to what we
yeah,
were doing. We couldn't come back in and swim at maximum speeds the next day if we weren't recovered. And
yeah,
so
yeah,
that was part of like, okay, we've got to stop
yeah,
now. And even in practices, it was like, okay, let's do a little bit of speed and let's couple that with some easy swimming, some technical
yeah,
work, some
yeah, yeah.
some stuff where you just turn your brain off maybe and
Exactly.
maybe float on your back for a little bit of time. And that
Well,
that is still part of the workout.
the concept of easy fast is easy to talk about, and you have to work on in each swim. Easy fast, whether it's a 50 on up, and what that is, so that I've and that. And you mentioned the word grind. One thing about Summer is it's never a grind. She comes to the pool every day with this like huge smile on her face and
Yeah.
just anticipating. And I think that's the added, not just with Summer, but with all the kids, that's the attitude that I try to instill. I never use the word grind. I mean, we know, the kids know that Saturday mornings they're going to have to bring it.
Right,
They're
right.
getting up at,
Yeah.
and that,
Yeah.
and so what we do is do stuff on dry. I'd even do some goofy, like almost cheerleading stuff, that's clapping and stuff like that to get their head right, But I think that's the word that kills us in swimming, and is oh, we just, mindless, mind-numbing repetition.
Right.
Well, if your mind is off, you're not going to get better. You gotta be able to focus on and that's what's hard. I think that's the hardest thing, because particularly in swimming, where yeah, you are staring at the black line. We try to incorporate as much variety, and even on dryland, I try to incorporate variety. But there's just some stuff you got to fricking do,
Yeah.
and
Right.
you're going to do it Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and and uh, I I write on the board. I write mundane is our enemy, and
Mhm. Mhm.
so how do you make mini band series that they're going to do sometimes 6 times a week, and they do before meets? Make sure they're concentrating. And, I don't know. I don't have a secret. It's just you got to be. Now, I'm an old man and I had my haircut yesterday, but with
Well, you're
gray
lucky you
hair.
still
So,
got here. Don't worry about that.
so, so sometimes it's different now than it was 20 years ago. Some of them listen and some of them go like, oh, shit, he's just a dumb old man,
Well,
It's
listen,
just,
part of what has made you great and what you incorporate is innovation into everything that you've done throughout your career. And we're at a point in time now, Vern, where we're seeing innovation really come into athletics
yeah,
in terms of all this technology. And I don't want to mention any names specifically, but there's a lot of stuff out there that gives you feedback these days, right? Like
yeah,
feedback's
yeah,
very,
yeah,
very
yeah,
important.
yeah.
Where is the line on the feedback? Like I know people are wearing watches all day that basically
Hmm.
give them information all day long, and
Hmm.
sometimes you'll wake up in the morning and it'll give you a score and it'll say you're not rested enough, and I always felt like if I was going to be wearing technology that told me that I wasn't ready for practice, I don't know if I would wear that. I don't know if my mind could go to a point where it said, you're not ready to do something that is absolutely necessary
Yeah.
for you to do today. Right. And so Where is the line in the technology, you think?
For me, it's a really not a fine line. It's black and white. And today, less so in the water than we can with sprinting and track activities because of the nature of the aquatic environment. Although there's a lot of things coming up. There's a guy coming from Australia, Kent, works with Kenneth Graham, who used to be at NSWIS, and bringing something to show us on Monday. And Chris Webb had already seen it when he's down there. I don't know if it's going to be a game changer. But I know that just because you can measure it doesn't mean it's meaningful.
Right.
Okay. And you're old enough to have gone through the lactate phase, where everybody was pricking your ear,
Everybody.
and we found out that it didn't give us useful information.
No.
It did not give us useful, actionable information that we could use, there. And there was a lot of method. Okay. And then heart rate training. Heart rate training is like, yeah, I hope your heart rate is, we can predict your heart rate based on the stroke, the effort, and that. So
I can guess my heart rate now, Vern, down to a beat,
I'm sure, yeah.
just because we've studied it for years.
And you can see, and that brings me to my point. I want to educate the swimmer and the athlete to be able to really read and be sensitive to their body.
Right.
Okay.
Yes.
And sleep monitoring. I mean, I'm a cynical bastard is really what it comes down to. And I go, sleep? You think it's important? Like, oh yeah, we saw shit. I mean, when I was an athlete in college, I was a poor American football player. If I wasn't training, I occasionally studied. I just slept all the time. Now I can't, old men can't sleep, but it's quality of sleep. So I want the athlete to keep track of that, not on a band, which is, by the way, is flawed. Most of those measures are flawed.
Yeah.
A heart rate. I talked to one coach, and he'll probably listen to this and he'll flame me. Heart rate, if you're basing your training on heart rate variability and you have great swimmers, I want to swim with my swimmers against you all the time, because 9 times out of 10 we'll beat you.
Right.
Because our training will be based on perceived effort. How was that? And you train them as to perceived effort. Okay. I ask, I don't want to keep using summer as an example, but our better kids to rate the dryland workout and then rate the water workout. Keep a training log. And I have an axiom I got from I think from Bill Sweeten. Win the workout. Okay.
Right.
Well, win the workout. Yeah, that's cool. How do you win the workout? So we rate it. If you go minus, 0, plus. Okay. And a minus, it was terrible. I just didn't get it today. I wasn't there. It didn't work. And we have those workouts. And you got to shut the door and move on. 0, it was okay. I did what I was supposed to do. And plus is I really nailed it. Coach said I have to work on this particular thing. I really nailed it. Well, I can tell you that if you're not winning 85% of the workouts, you're not going to stand on the podium. If you're winning 80%, you're going to be standing looking at somebody singing the national anthem, And so how does that work? Well, that means the athlete has to internalize what they're doing and understand what they feel. Now, this is tough sometimes. We were trying to introduce this to 14 and 15-year-old kids, boys or girls, and they all have technology, but I can say, and I don't want to necessarily speak for Brent, but we're just, it's not in our wheelhouse. I'll tell you a story with Emma in 2000. It was about somebody gave her I don't want to say what, a watch. And she wore it for about 2 weeks. And about the start of the 3rd week, she comes to practice. And I told her, I biased her and I said, it's not going to give you good, but she did it. And she shows up Monday of the 3rd week for dryland, and the watch, I says, where's the watch? She says, well, it ran out of juice and I'm not going to use it anymore. So that's good. So.
Well, I think, look, I agree with a couple of things that you said in terms of knowing yourself, understanding yourself. I think is very important, right? Yeah. But I also think that the technology can go too far, and that you lean into it too much and believe it so much that it becomes the mouthpiece for what you should do, when you should do it, how you should do it, kind of thing. And that should never be the case. It should just be a supplementary tool to maybe give you some information, but
Yeah.
it becomes, it's attached to you, right? Like you put it on yourself, and you walk around with it every day. So now it becomes part of who you are, and that's where the psychology really starts to play into it. It's if this was a thing where you just put it on yourself, it gave you a readout, and then you walked away and you put it down, and then you came back to it 24 hours later, great. I can live with that. But something that's telling you, all day long, just pumping information into you and telling you what you should think and how you should feel, like I don't agree with that.
It's information overload, isn't it? And one of the Elise Perry, who's one of the best athletes in the world, played in the World Cup in soccer. We had this conversation over coffee yesterday morning after workout. Too much of what's been done with various monitoring devices and that it's telling you what you can't do. And as a coach, I'm not Pollyanna, man. I didn't, I didn't get to where I am by saying, oh, it's, everything's good, because everything isn't good sometimes. It's frickin' 30 degrees out, but I want to figure out what you can do. And we're gonna really zero in on what you can do.
Yes.
And I'm gonna ask you, how'd you sleep last night? And I want you to be honest with me, and then I'll see how the warm-up goes, out of the pool, in the pool, and then you make adjustments. That's called coaching, and that is what we've gotta, and and the old, I don't want to say the old guys, the older coaches, I think, got that. The younger coaches today are, well, some of them are enamored with technology. I'm enamored with technology. Oh, it's so cool, the stuff that you can do.
I want you to understand your body. That's what I want you to do. Understand yourself, right?
We don't film enough, by the way. I think that, I know I said that way back when I first started working with Carl, and I know they film a lot. It's still ponderous to set up the underwater cameras. I think the kids in this day and age visually need the more of that kind of feedback they can. And that's technology to a certain extent. Right. Virtual reality, I think, will help with technique and stroke mechanics. Some for them to be able to do that. So
let me ask you one more topic here, and I appreciate your time. I know you got to run. You got a workout coming up.
I've got a training session here.
Last thing I want to touch on real quick is this idea and concept of specificity in regards to how much specific work should you be doing out of the pool that relates to what you're doing in the pool. Like if you're swimming a lot of butterfly in practice, how much specific butterfly work should you be working on out of, like, very specific work out of the, or should you be avoiding any type of specific work because you're doing so much butterfly in the pool? What's your thoughts on that?
Your last statement is correct. I don't want to add stress to stress. I want to prepare for stress.
Yes.
So if I know what stroke emphasis is today, and we'll try to lead in the previous day, sometimes with dryland. With Brent and I, we could communicate. I'll stop in today. He's been gone, Canada with summer, and we'll okay. So now, what's the emphasis going to be? He determines sets and reps. By the way, I determine exercises, but he has right of first refusal and last refusal on the exercise. Right. So in my world, I'm never going to imitate. Hardly ever, maybe 3% will I imitate the stroke on dryland. And I think that's been one of the biggest changes. And I see people taking dumbbells, and now we go through a lot of patterns, and there's a lot of work done that will prepare you for the fly on rings and things like that. But the thought is never to imitate the stroke. We're going to prepare you for the stroke, and knock on wood. And I think you can ask all the teams that use the gain swimming methodology. We had one kid in the last 5 years miss a meet with a shoulder problem, and he's a surfer. He fell off his board and separated his shoulder. Okay. And we don't have kids sitting on the edge of the pool with ice and that, because of and it's relentless, not mindless, relentless work on some remedial stuff. There's nothing is ever said in our program about injury prevention. But if you come to the session this afternoon, you'll see that there's a lot of, it's transparently woven through the fabric of the whole dryland program.
Right,
So,
right.
know
Well, I know you're the founder of Gain. I've had Chris Webb on, who works with you and Gain. And if anybody is interested, they can find you. What's the website for Gain?
It's yes. Good. Let me make sure I get this right. It's and Chris is really in charge of Gain Swimming now, and I'm just the I don't know, facilitator sometimes, and that he's done a wonderful job and really kicked me in the butt to systematize even more. It's gainswim.com. You can go on that site, and there's a lot of video and stuff like that. And Jen wanted me to make sure and mention the World Clinic, that I'm speaking at the World Clinic this year, and it's going to be a lot of the things we talked about here, sort of reflections, recollections of things that I think I've learned and that I'm learning right now, going forward to of what we have to do. And I know I feel a lot more comfortable, I guess, just because I always said, going back to even that, I'm not going to be really good at what I do in terms of dryland until I can totally immerse myself in swimming. And I'm not at all, I'm not at every minute of every workout. So sometimes we finish and I'll be at the start of the workout. Sometimes and constant communication with the coaches. Brent is great. We have great assistants here. And he has to rein me in sometimes. Vern, remember, they have to swim now, and I mean, that's cool. That's good. And I'm okay, because for me, we all get geeked out in our area, and crazy. It's a fun journey. So,
well, it's a pleasure to have you on here. Jennifer Lamont, the CEO of ASCA, has put us together, and finally somebody got us on video together. So thank you for that. You are at the ASCA clinic. People can find you. I'm sure they'll be able to sit down with you as well.
Like,
pick your brain,
be fun.
all that sort of stuff.
Yeah, for sure.
That'd be great. All right, Vern. Thanks for doing this, man. All right, appreciate it. Take care.
Cool.
Bye.